I guess the biggest thing I want to say first is it's I remember I told you this, but it's important to know that from 122 to 140, he's explaining Goldstein, and and I'm going to go through it in detail because it's so hard and yet so interesting, because they are Gestaltists, and like Gestaltists, they've got it sort of right, they've got it sort of wrong. So it just occurs to me as I'm talking to you that a further complication I didn't realize till this minute is that they've got it wrong in a different way than Kafka and Kerler have got it wrong. It's not the same mistake that he's accusing them of. Well, wait a minute. Well, in the end, it is. In the end, it is. So they've got it wrong. At the deepest and most broad level, they both, that is, the Gestaltists we studied when we did the perception part on sensation and association, and Goldstein, who are these neurogestalt people, have all missed being in the world. And it always comes back to that again, that they try to understand these gestalts without bringing in this way that organisms are always involved in the world trying to achieve something. What Sean Kelly calls the normative dimension, that there's always something that they can be, that they're trying to do, that they can do better or worse. That's the deep level that the Gestaltists miss and that Goldstein misses. But now we have to go into detail. But I want to make one other general statement, which I really didn't realize fully till this time through. But there's a big chunk you can skip, which isn't really getting us anywhere. And now I wrote down very clearly. I know where it is. Here it is. From 141 to 150, rereading it, I just found myself marking nothing. He's going on and on in some detailed argument with intellectualists and empiricists, but not the kind that we know, but some neuro kind, and it's not advancing the argument a bit as far as I can see. So you don't have to skip it. In fact, of course, I would recommend that you read it because maybe there's something in there that I missed that I don't see anything. So PG is what's being done from 122 to 140. You could sort of get along without that too, but I'm going to try to explain that. But then you can skip 141 to 150. That leaves plenty to struggle with and to read. So let's start. You can see that? Okay. Well, and now let's go going into this in detail. As I find the first page, there. Okay. So it's first we have to look at what Gelb and Goldstein think is normal. And they've got a fairly okay view of the normal phenomena. But they've always got, well, can you close the door, Rick? There's a big wind across. Get to, leave the windows open when there's everything's open in the big room. And if it gets too cold on the people by the window, you can close that too. Okay, so let's start with page 125. I'm going to have to stick very close to the text because it's trying to unravel the text that you get into it. So, well, really at the bottom of 124, they're basic. Let me again give you the big picture. That they try to understand normal human beings in terms of having both a concrete, tactile, grasping attitude and an abstract, visual, mental, standing back attitude. And in normal people, both these attitudes are fine. And they work together by a kind of, quote, mixture, which Merleau-Ponty thinks is a completely inadequate way of understanding how they work together. They're not a mixture. They're two aspects of this deeper thing called being in the world according to him. And you can't get that by stirring together these two abstract, and I want to say that word for him, these two modes that are aspects that Gelb Goldstein singled out. Not that they're wrong, he says in one place. It's just that this way of thinking about it is too abstract because it leaves out, again, I have to use the word abstract. The abstract attitude is this intellectual thing, but now just using abstract in the normal way, by taking out these two aspects and separating them, the concrete, the abstract attitude, then they never can mix them back together again because they leave out the deep thing of which they're both aspects, and they can't understand fully what's wrong with Schneider, since they can't understand Schneider in terms just of these two aspects without getting at the underlying thing that's wrong with Schneider. Now, I'll give you the punchline now, which we should be arriving at in an hour and a half. His intentional arc has gone limp. If you see what that means, you see that that's supposed to be the real meaning that explains all of his problems. Okay, but now we have to get there bit by bit. I just didn't want to lose it. At the bottom of 124. On 124 and 125, we're all now in Goldstein, and we're looking at what they understand as the normal and how they see that in terms of these two attitudes. Another way to use these two attitudes, I want to make them not seem so strange to you. The concrete is the practical involved, and the abstract is the theoretical detached. That's just another, that may be more familiar way of talking about them, more the way I talk about them. And remember, there it is true that people can be involved and that people can be detached. That's fine, but the question is that those are two variations of something else, and that's what they don't see. Yeah. Do you mind if I want to cover that? Yeah, no, I think we're all right. The way they initially make the contrast is just between actually doing something and sort of something more like pretending to do it. Abstract movements, say, would be movements performed with the eye shut. But precisely what the ability to perform the abstract movement consists in is being able to sort of do it with second nature, just, sort of salute. And there's no mention of intellectual or theoretical dimensional characterization of abstract. Oh, absolutely. That's what's all maybe I have to take. But there is no reference. Okay, well, if you don't skip those pages, you see them going on and on and on, talking about the intellectualist way of viewing the problem. And the intellectualist way of viewing the problem just is to try to do it all in terms of the abstract. See if I can think of a place to return to. Let's just keep Aldous' comment in mind, and we'll get there. Certainly, just being able to salute with your eyes shut is not normally the abstract. If he calls it that, we'd have to figure out what to do about it. It's the concrete. Well, no, I see. The concrete, you have to really be in a situation. The abstract, I see, always has to do with what you can imagine. So he said yeah. That movement. Okay, so the patient is unable to perform abstract movements with his eyes shut. Movements, that is, which are not relevant to any actual situation, such as moving arms and legs order. Okay, I'm demonstrating the thing in. That's all theoretical. That's all. Why? Because it's not relevant to any situation. It's desituated. The essence of the theoretical, the way I'm using it, is not to be involved in a concrete, practical situation. So imagine you think. What? The abstract movement is characterized as a movement that you're performing in the situation as you imagine. So you're not involved in a real situation. Well, you are involved in a situation. No, you're imagining you're involved in a situation. That's you're involved in an imaginary situation. That's right. Okay. Being involved. No, being involved. No. Throwing out your world. Yeah, you're sure to project the world in either. But if you're involved in an imaginary situation, or imagining you're involved in a situation, that's not practical hands-on activity. You're not getting any feedback. You're not getting any, you can't fail to get a grip. Try to, imagining getting a grip on your coffee mug, or imaginary, or getting a grip on an imaginary coffee mug, it comes to the same thing, is not the same as actually getting a grip on it. Here's one way to say it, only this is not in here, but it might help. I know this might help a lot, might just blur things. In Milner and Goodale, who are these people who are the interesting ones who actually videotaped people's hands when they were getting ready to go out the door, and actually showed how their hand was magically at the door as soon as they formed the intention to go out, meaning their hand began to take the shape of the doorknob as soon as they got ready to go out, which is terrific. I also discovered something which I haven't mentioned, but it's now become very interesting. You can also say, imagine that you're just getting up and going out the door. What do you think happens to the hand then? Well, it's hard to picture, but it takes a sort of a door shape, but not an actually concretely relevant door shape. That's very interesting. That shows that the attitude of imagining going out the door is not like going out the door or getting ready to grip an imaginary cup. Your hand will sort of get somewhere, but if it's getting ready to grip your coffee cup and drink your coffee, it has to get exactly right to get where the handle is and everything. That's different. And now we'll just have to read things. Yeah, what? Yeah.
I think that Schneider's problem is that he cannot perform abstract movements without taking up a theoretical stance on it. It's not the definition of abstract movement that requires him to take a theoretical stance. There is a real contrast there, no question in the context of drawing, but the contrast between concrete and abstract is a contrast between two different kinds of a normal lived experience. Two kinds of ways of normal experience.
That's right.
Schneider can't do the abstract.
Schneider really can't do either one of them right. That's why it's so hard to follow. He can't. He does have a certain abstract, a very weird abstract. Remember, he has to do as if he was a computer, figure out where his arm is and where his head is, and bring his arm in relation to his head when he's imagining saluting.
But that, by the terminology in this chapter, seems to me, that is all given as evidence that he's unable to engage in abstract movement. He does this weird flexion, muscular.
Yeah, both are right. I mean, I think. I mean, when he they both have this peculiar character, which is what I want to talk about. There's a sort of a right way to do abstract and what normal people do, and then there's Schneider version of it, which is somehow a broken down, distorted version of it, so that he has to find his hand and find his head and bring his hand in objective space to his head. That's abstract, all right, but it's not the way people imagine saluting. And he has to figure out analogies. Remember, when he's behaving like a computer, he's certainly not in the concrete attitude. And he's certainly not in the normal abstract attitude because he's not normal. But I think he's in the abnormal abstract attitude. But maybe that's not the way they talk about it. Well, let's look. Yeah.
Yeah, and this is kind of a point Alvin mentioned last week. I think it's certainly important to pay attention to how, at least when Kelvin Goldstein talk about it, it's just about abstracting healthy movement. I think bringing in which is complicated. I did find a passage where he does talk about that.
Yeah.
But it's not till later on, so I'm not sure
I don't
what the relation is between
it's easy. What you make in the concrete attitude or concrete movements and what you make in the abstract attitude or abstract movements, I don't see any big deal.
I think it might be a big deal.
Well, then tell me how, or maybe we don't know yet.
Well,
keep an eye open.
Okay, well, one thing I think is that, well, when talking about attitudes, it's kind of, I don't know, I just hear a kind of Heideggerian take where it's like the fear, and not what's actually
I see.
going on.
No, that would be giving them too much credit. That's
Yes,
right.
That's what I'm afraid of. Yeah.
I see. Well, keep your eyes open. I'm pretty sure that concrete and abstract attitude are their terms, and we have to just get used to that.
Well, the movement is the one that's.
Well, so is attitude. No.
It's not, well, I don't see attitude.
Well, you said you found it.
I found one place.
Well, but it's their term. I mean, and the fact that it's their term, and that
I don't know whose term it is. I mean, it might just be more Merleau-Ponty, but I guess, but I want to go back to the previous point of this page. There is this important distinction of abstract movements that Schneider can make with his eyes open versus abstract movements which he cannot make with his eyes closed. So, I mean, I feel like that's the important distinction to get clear.
Why is that important?
Well, one thing, that's how the problem is introduced. And so if you want to know what Schneider can and can't do.
If we want to really try,
abstract movement with his eyes open in a very weird, contorted way.
Yeah.
You can't do the abstract movement.
Well, that's tied up with the role of the visual in it, which has got some very important thing. The visual, insofar as he's got a little bit of vision, which isn't much, he has more of the abstract way of being able to cope. I'm trying to find a word that's different than abstract movement. What you want is a word for abstract behavior. I mean, who cares? Movement is too specific. Maybe if you don't like attitude, let's
Right, but I mean, that's the word that Geld and Goldstein are using. So we want to know what's wrong with that way of thinking of it.
Well, I'll settle for movement. Or comportment. Anyway, he has, what was I just saying? He has the abstract comportment, and vision helps him out insofar, and that's why you get all this discussion of the relation of abstract movement to vision. And he doesn't have much vision, and he doesn't have much abstract movement either. But if vision does help him, he can't do it at all without seeing what he's doing. Yeah.
Right, he is talking about both thinkers having an abstract and concrete attitude.
A face.
When he puts it in very intellectual and language, and also this critique that there's also that it's too cognitive, that it's so too much on consciousness,
Absolutely.
not on like the vital connection.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's good. Consciousness is another clue. He thinks that they do it in terms of consciousness or else mechanical. That's when he gets, we'll get to that, when he starts putting it in Sartrean forms, that they think that it's either physiological, that everybody's behavior is, and it isn't just Schneider. That's their basic understanding, but Schneider has it in a. So they think, I understand it. Everybody's behavior is misunderstood if you think that it's either physiological and mechanical, or that it's mental and computational, roughly, or intellectually. Those are the wrong ways of thinking about the way people behave. And when he's talking about these wrong ways, he'll use terms like the in itself, which is the empiricist mechanical understanding of movement in space, and he'll call the other one, when he'll use for itself, which is Sartrean terminology, for the conscious part. And those are clues that it's not his view he's giving. It's not even Geld and Goldstein at their best, but he's saying that really, because Geld and Goldstein separate the abstract and the concrete movement, and don't see that how they're commonly grounded in being in the world, you can push their view to the extreme where it really becomes the physiological versus the mental, and that just shows that it's wrong. And because it does that, it can't get near what's wrong with Schneider. Because I'll just keep repeating this because it helps to know where you're heading. Schneider's got something wrong with being in the world. He has funny words for it. It's leveled, it's limp, it's weak. So whatever it is, it's not something wrong with their abstract movement or their concrete movement, although it expresses itself that way. There's a deeper something wrong. Lydia.
Well, Merleau-Ponty says that before at the end of page 24 that the memory is open to those verbal and imaginary situations which he can choose for himself and become suggested to him by force of companion. But these are the situations as well.
Oh, that's just a pun on situations, I think. I don't see what you're saying there. The important thing is he's open to something real and imaginary. If you want to use the word situation, both for being in a situation which is coping and being in a situation in which you're just staring at something without doing anything or have anything at stake. Call them both situations if you want, but the important thing is there are two ways of doing things, being involved and being detached. And you're making that, it's like a joke, it seems to me, to say, well, being detached is a situation too. Yeah, but then there are two kinds of situations, being involved and being detached, and we have to just re-say the whole thing. So nothing is added, is it?
I think being in an aspect of two doesn't mean that you're detached. The way you should be in the theoretical
You don't. It, you don't either. Well, tell me why not.
Because well, it's like, how can you conceive of somebody making an abstract movement without actually being oriented in a situation with all these concepts in your head, being in the world? How, you must have that concept of the door and be situated.
Well,
Have an abstract
being situated and having a concept of others.
like, so to get rid of the concept part of it, you have to be situated. I
To what?
want you to have an abstract movement, to imagine going for the door.
Minimally situated. If you have to find where your arm is and where your head is, your body is your body is just a blob, and your directedness is very what? Well, I mean, remember what happens. Your directedness is either sort of totally mechanical, in which you just go to the door in a completely involved way, or it's so unsituated that, well, or what? Or you can't get to the door. What does he have to do to go out the door? If he isn't involved, he has to. When you tell him, don't go out the door, just go up to the door and stop. That's what he can't do. Right? That's clear. But let me just say this: why can't he? When I try to get keep your eye on the phenomena. We'll go to the vocabulary later. What is it that he can't do about doors? He can certainly march right out the door if you tell him to, as long as he's in the situation as, let's say, now it's time to go home. And he can go into his own house too, remember, if he's trying to go to his house, but he walks right by and doesn't recognize his house if he's not. That is, then when he's in the concrete situation, he's just like an animal. He's totally involved, and he has no other options, and he can't stand that. That's what it is to go out the door for him. What's so funny is that you can tell him, well, just go up to the door, but not out of it. And he can't do it. Why? Well, because if you're going to go out the door, your hand has to start taking the form, and your body has to start taking the shape that it's going to need when you get there and go out. If you tell him you're going to go to the door, but you're not really going to go out, then his hand and body can't take the right shape, and he can't go. He can't do it, as I understand it. Wait, first him. Okay, go ahead.
I think, like, when something says the abstract situation, like on page 155, the character of either can place himself in an imaginary situation. Something that's not completely concrete, like crack this or do that or the other thing. Like,
right.
In the experiment, the goal is like you put the scientist in concrete situation because he actively is willing to participate in the experiment. So these like when he's trying to perform a concrete task, he's still kind of messed up because the intentional art is messed up. So he still goes preparatory movement and stuff like that. But in terms of the abstract situation, he comprehended it all.
Oh, he can in his peculiar way. He could figure out that something's a triangle by feeling that it's got three sides. He could figure out that it's a metaphor by saying, well, it's hearing and seeing is done by sense organs. That's why it's a metaphor. He can do that abstract stuff. It's just very peculiarly unrelated to any field for how you normally involvedly deal with triangles or metaphors, I think.
Well, you have to like to do the abstract, you have to bring it into a concrete situation. Like you have to actually create like a triangle or something like that, and then you like, oh, like triangle has like when he was describing how we could add and subtract and do all that, we didn't have the concept of a number, like 5 + 4 - 4. They said, well, 5 remains, but they didn't understand that the +4 - 4, like the abstract concept right there. Like because numbers were just a sequence of things that you count in the moment in the concrete situation, but you can see it like abstract. And I think that's because the intentional art is messed up and can't doesn't have the background, can't unite the past, present, and future. Like
yes, that's always because of that. But all we're discussing, I keep thinking, is our terminology. Are you going to say that he hasn't got any abstract attitude because he can't do these things, or his abstract attitude is sort of utterly minimal and computer-like? It's like saying, does he have the concrete attitude if he can go out the door, but he can't go toward the door and stop? I would say, in both cases, maybe I'm all off on this and I'll learn a lot. In both, if he has some kind of pathetic parody of the abstract and some kind of pathetic animal-like parody of the concrete, it isn't as if he doesn't have them. He can make these wallets. but he has them in ways that normal people don't. And the question is sort of what's missing? And Gelb and Goldstein really say, I think, listen, pay attention to this. What's missing is the right mix of the two. There's a footnote where he catches Gelb talking about we need the proper mixture of the abstract and the concrete, and Schneider doesn't have it. But of course, and immediately Merleau-Ponty says, surely that's not going to explain this weird. And then he catches Gelb saying in another meeting, well, I was wrong about that. I shouldn't have said mixture. But the problem is they don't have anything else to say because they don't have this fundamental thing of which those two are aspects. Okay, Sophie, and then Alan. Yeah,
I don't know his name, but
that's Olivia.
okay. Well, he was saying that how in both cases in the abstract and the concrete, there is a situation, but in the abstract case, it's an imaginary situation, and I think the point he's trying to make is that both in the normal person, you can have abstract and concrete, like you can have them both because they both come from the world, but in different ways. So I mean, they both require like situations, but one of them creates flow, so it's just like two different things.
For normal people, yes.
So this is they're
Well,
both
I guess I'm only worried about the word situation. I'll give him the word situation, but then we need a new word for what was calling the concrete situation, where you are involved in actually doing something. Call that situation A. And another situation where you're not involved in concretely coping and doing something, you're imagining things and so forth. If you want to call that a situation, call it situation I, the imagining. It's just a question of words. They're just two different things you can do. You can cope in an involved way, or you can cope in a way which is not animal-like, not grounded in some task that is going on. Well, task is ambiguous. They're all ambiguous. But the phenomenon isn't ambiguous. It's clear enough that there are two kinds of tasks as well as two kinds of situations. What? And you're coping both. And there are two kinds of cope. That's so don't worry about the vocabulary. Worry about the phenomenon.
What matters is that what we're dealing with in the text is not a two-way bifurcation of the phenomenon. There's three different phenomena, all of which are in play. And we don't want to get caught up in the vocabulary, but I think it's important to see that there are three different.
Tell me the three.
Well, the three are: the first is world publicity behavior, which is concrete.
That's it. Okay.
That's what he calls centripetal. Uses that term.
Yes,
Because it's coming from the world anyway.
That's right.
And then there is centrifugal,
Right.
which is where the background is thrown out. This is all on page 147. The background is thrown out or imagined.
Right.
And that's abstract.
Right.
Both of those are forms of normal behavior. Both of those are forms of situated behavior. Both of those are forms of lived experience.
Those are,
and then there's a third contrast.
Yeah.
Even though there is a difference between the door soliciting me and my imagining the presence of the door. Those are different. But the third contrast is where I must use my intellect and my vision to find my arm, flex my muscle, and go through the motions that my mind tells me I would perform if I were engaged. And he nicely feels all three on page 127 when he first describes the situation where I'm related to a friend.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I remember. Okay.
And then he says, if I then execute, quote, the same movement, but without any presence, that is to say, not in concrete situation,
No friend, yeah.
or even imaginary partner in my mind, that is to say, it's not an abstract situation, but treated as a set of movements in themselves. If I perform a flexion of the forearm in relation to my upper arm, with the supination of the arm, and a flexion of the finger, my body, which a moment ago was the vehicle of the movement, both in the abstract and in the concrete case, now becomes its own end. Its motive logic is no longer directed towards someone in the world, but towards my body itself, towards my fore and upper arm. And so that's the third class. So there's these few distinctions.
Well, it seems to me that only two of them play a big role. I mean, that third thing doesn't come around.
And the third, I just said, I think the little page was pretty right. He said that instead of this, in the novel, every event, backside or motor event, ranges to consciousness, intentions that go from the body as virtual action center towards the body itself or towards the object. So these two sides are part of the bigger material reality.
And the third thing of sort of sharing.
And truth would answer to the world. They're changing the subject. Changing the subject. That may be true, but that's there's still in a more local level. Because what's at stake is whether we want to understand the contrast here between a theoretical abstract attitude and an engaged attitude. The point is, gives us evidence of what a truly detached attitude would look like, but it's not what he's calling the abstract attitude.
That's right, because
Maybe they're both abstract. I don't know.
it's the kind of parody of the normal
I was looking
abstract.
at things in a present hand way, speaking of Heideggerian.
Good. Well, let's do that.
Another way.
Helpful. It's as if he had. Let's say that for the Heideggerians. It's as if the concrete attitude is dealing with things ready to hand, and the abstract attitude is dealing with things present at hand.
Sometimes ready to hold, sometimes ready to hand, sometimes present at hand. That's what I was going to say.
No, there's no present at hand in the abstract.
Well, I think his point was that there can be an abstract attitude where you are looking at something as present at hand and really articulating your body to do something in a very present at hand way. That's the abstract attitude that's not coping, but there is an abstract attitude that is coping, that a normal person, develops. Like if I was, my original point before was if I was going to go open that door and have an abstract attitude towards it, I wouldn't actually calculate when my arm goes and look at it in my thinking. It's not happening. I wouldn't actually go right there. I would just do it with my head.
Right. Yeah.
And that's the abstract attitude that's coping.
Well, for those of us who don't speak kind of that,
Wait, Schneider, you can't do that. You don't do the other stuff.
That wasn't the abstract. Wait. If you're just going to go out the door, that's not the abstract. Oh, big categories ready to hand.
Imagine going out the door.
Oh, imagine going out the door. If you imagine going out the door, you're in the present at hand business.
Well, my point was that usually when I imagine, right now, imagine I go out the door, I'm not calculating, I'm really looking at that door hand. Even in my imagination, I'm just kind of doing it in my imagination.
Yeah,
that's why.
It's so. I mean, it's hard to know what that third thing is. I guess in Heideggerian terms. I don't even know.
Here's the question: if you're imagining going out the door, you have to get Heideggerian terms. Are you looking at the door as a present hand thing, or are you?
Well, that's what I'm saying. It's weird. I don't know. Do you know? I
think sometimes yes. Like if I've never done it before, I'm just learning. Then yeah, I've actually got to look at the thing very, present hand way. Like I did here, and then I have this memory of it, but I still don't have that coping attitude. So I got to actually look at it present at hand, even imagine going out the door.
Oh.
But I mean, I think there's two ways of having this abstract attitude. Like I think I will just
well, I'm completely. There's only the important ones. I will review that there is, if you want to do it in Heideggerian quick, there is the ready to hand and the present at hand, and then of course there is transcendence, being in the world, openness, which with both of those modes of intentionality, that's what they're called now, and not attitude and not motion. The ready to hand kind of intentionality, the present at hand kind of intentionality, presupposes being in the world, which is not itself a kind of intentionality, Heidegger says, but the condition for the other two. That's exactly what Merleau-Ponty has thought. Only, like Heidegger, he calls it existence sometimes. And sometimes he calls it being in the world. Those are synonymous for him and for Heidegger. Yeah. You were going to say that? Oh, with this what passage? Any quote? Because there is this quote, which is sort of funny quote, where he does it with, we might as well look at it, where he introduces, here we are, on page 140. It's got Husserl in it, but it doesn't matter. The Husserl's been credited with this distinction. Well, we have to read what he's talking about. There's one of these punchlines on 140. The distinction between concrete and abstract movement, between Greifen and Zeigen, comes down to the distinction between the physiological and the psychic. This is not his view. Existence in itself and existence for itself. That's wrong. That's what happens if you push Geld and Goldstein with their mixture to the limit. And then there's the footnote. Husserl's often been credited with this distinction, which is a bad distinction. In fact, it is found in Descartes and Kant, It's bad wherever you find it. In our opinion, Husserl's originality lies beyond the notion of intentionality. I mean, if you don't giving him credit for this distinction, just which is what Sartre would do, by the way. It's Sartre too who has the for itself in itself distinction. That's not important. Um, if Husserl's got anything right, it's to be found in the elaboration of his notion of the discovery beneath the intentionality of representations, a deeper intentionality, which he's always claiming Husserl's got, but which I'm not convinced Husserl's got. But anyway, what others, this is the funny part, have called existence. Who's the others? That's Heidegger. That's the deeper thing. It probably shouldn't be called deeper intentionality. At least Heidegger won't call it that. But it doesn't matter. It's this deeper thing that makes the two normal kinds of intentionality possible. And skipping a little, the next set of footnotes sort of gives away where he is. That it says Galvin Goldstein never named the third term between the psychic and the physiological, between the for itself and the in itself, to which their analysis always led them, and which we call existence. So now he's taken over the Heidegger term. It's very confusing. That's why I want you to look at this quote. It's unfortunate that there's just two different meanings of existence right next to each other. There's existence for itself and existence in itself, which is the Sartrean, Cartesianized, Husserlian understanding of the two modes of being. And then there is existence, the way Heidegger uses it, which is neither of them, neither in itself nor for itself, but something deeper which makes them possible. And unfortunately, that's also called existence. I can't do anything about it. Everybody's claiming the word existence, except maybe not Husserl. I think only Sartre. Sartre, you have to understand just for a minute that the way things develop is absolutely peculiar in the history of continental philosophy at this point. Husserl has his view, which is, I think, basically Cartesian, basically for itself in itself talk, and representation, intentionality, transcendental consciousness, and so forth. Heidegger reacts against that, develops his whole notion of being in the world and existence as more basic than any kind of intentionality. And then the funny thing is, Sartre comes around, and being French and unable to think outside of Descartes, at least in those days, Cartesianizes Heidegger, turns it back into consciousness and objects in itself, for itself, and links up with Husserl. So that Sartre can be thought of as sort of existentialized Husserl. And Husserl thought, no, there's one other peculiar twist, that Husserl thought that Heidegger was existentialized Husserl, but never mind that. The main thing is that you see what Husserl looks like when put in existential terms. You look at Sartre. Then he got it partly by actually listening to Husserl, but he got it in part by trying to sort of state what Heidegger's saying, but state it in a way that a Cartesian could understand it. And the crucial thing to pay attention to is whether consciousness plays a crucial role. In Husserl and Sartre, consciousness plays an absolutely crucial role. Whether it's active or passive, it's always constituting, it's always synthesizing. And in Heidegger, consciousness doesn't even appear in being. And it's not a question of actively or passively synthesizing. It's this whole issue of opening up the world. Yeah. Good question. Well, if I just follow my notes, we'll get there. I'm going to go to following my notes. And maybe we will also discover the answer to some of this difficult terminological trouble we're having. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, if we can agree on the phenomena, the vocabulary can fall where it may, but I'm not sure we're agreeing on the phenomena. So let's start at the bottom of 124, which is where Alva picked it up. At least we can say that the normal subject can immediately come to grips with his body and enjoys, he enjoys the use of his body, not only insofar as it is involved in a concrete setting, given situation, not only in relation to the task imposed by a particular job, he is not open merely to real situations. I don't think, that's what got us into this discussion, and that's true. So but the normal person is also involved, and this is very important in the concrete setting. And he also has this other use of his body, which I don't think makes much difference here. But over and above all this, his body is correlated with pure stimuli devoid of any practical bearing. He is open to the verbal and imaginary situations which he can choose for himself or which may be suggested to him in the course of an experiment. Well, roughly anyway, that's Gelb Goldstein's distinction between involved, I think, and abstract, though I see that there are two different ways that he has his body. I don't think it's going to turn out to be important, but we will see. On 125, there's more about the normal, about 59. And in the case of the normal subject, the body is available not only in real situations into which it's drawn, it can turn aside from the world. You see, let me just gloss it the way I understand it. The real situations in which the body is drawn is what I call involved. And I was calling situations, but let's call them real situations. Hooray, we've got a vocabulary now. Real situations means a situation in which you're really doing something, you're not just imagining it, you're coping actually. So you could be involved in a real situation and then you're drawn into it. We know all that. That's the affordance talk. It can turn aside from the world. I call that the disengaged attitude, of which theory would be a part. But let's call it turning aside from the world. Notice he does, and that's he doesn't call that a situation here. If he did, you'd have to call it an unreal situation. He can turn aside from the world, apply its activity to stimuli which affect its sensory surfaces, lend itself to experimentation, and generally speaking, take the place in the realm of the potential. And now that's fine. That's what I think of disengage. It is because of its confinement within the actual that an unsound sense of touch calls for special movements and so forth. Now, Schneider is in a certain way confined within the actual, though only partly, because he also has this sort of weird computer-like way of trying to make sense of the world when he isn't in the actual, but it's pretty pathetic. And just as his confinement in the actual is pretty pathetic, because whenever he's confined in the actual, there is not on the horizon any other actual. That's what I mean that he's behaving like an animal. He's locked into wallet making or going home. Remember this funny example. If he's going home, then his house is going to whistle to him and call him and draw him in when he goes by. But if he's not going home, he won't even recognize his house when he goes by, because he doesn't have on the margin of whatever project he has. Let's suppose he's not going home, he's walking home with Gurvich. Then that's his project, to go to Gurvich's house. Then his house won't even solicit him because it's not on the margin of his current involvement. Okay, so that's what's happening here. So now let's see. Don't want to read more. All of this is important. So there's his body. I'm skipping a little to the left side of the page. Body dependent on actual situations. I'm going to begin that long sentence. For a key, for instance, to appear as such, in my tactile experience, a kind of fullness of touch is required. A tactile field in which local impressions may be coordinated into a shape, just as notes, mere stepping stones, are stepping stones in a melody. By the way, this is all good Gestalt talk you recognize. This is Goldstein talking, and when Merleau-Ponty is trying to do what he always does, so get the best out of them, but show how they've missed something important. So now he's getting the best out of them in the button. So and there you viscosity of tactile data, which makes the body dependent upon actual situations. That's Schneider anyway. Reduces the object to a collection of successive characteristics, perception to an abstract account, recognition to a rational synthesis. See, these are things that he can do. Now, whether you want to call the abstract account and the rational synthesis abstract attitude or not, I think depends on whether you mean normal, which it isn't, or what's left of the abstract attitude in Schneider, because Schneider can do it.
It's just worth noticing rhetorically.
Yeah.
The point he's making here is that Schneider is confined to the concrete. That's the word he used. And the symptom of the confinement to the concrete is the need to be the rational synthesis of It's not an identification of the abstract with the rational synthesis. It's precisely because he lacks some normal abstract knowledge of imaginative possibilities
Mhm.
that is forced to engage in rational thinking.
But that isn't, surely it's not out of confinement to the concrete that we can perform that does give you this abstract account that it sounds sort of oxymoronic.
That's what he said.
Well, where does he say that? He is at above the middle of the page. He's confined to the concrete and actual, and he has an unsound sense of touch. And then he goes to the key. And in the key, the body is dependent on the actual situations. But oh yeah, and in the concrete, when he tries to deal with the key, all he gets is a bunch of isolated tactile impressions, which he then has to put together in a kind of rational synthesis and say, I guess after feeling it a while, this is that key. Okay, now let's see what else. Whereas the normal person, every event related to movement or sense of touch causes consciousness to put up a host of intentions, which run from the body as the center of potential action, either toward the body itself or toward the object. Well, we all agree that what Schneider doesn't have, whenever he's doing anything, involved or detached, he doesn't have any other intentions but the thing that he's sort of stuck in. Either he's stuck in isolated fragments like tactile impressions, or he's stuck in some job like making a wallet, and nothing. He lacks all of this uh, other intentions, host of other intentions that normal people have. By the way, it's so hard to follow this because notice he's doing Del Goldstein, the Gestalt talk. He wouldn't say consciousness puts up a host of intentions that run from the body to as the center of potential action toward the body itself or so forth. That's much too necessarily Sartrean project language. It puts too much activity on the side of consciousness. But he would say not consciousness sprouts out a host of intentions, but that the body responds to a host of solicitations. That even Del Goldstein will sometimes say that. But at this point, it sounds, whenever you see the word consciousness, I'll be willing to bet, though I could go wrong and mislead you, it's never going to be Merleau-Ponty's view. It's going to be the Del Goldstein view in these pages. And that's what he's saying here. So he's giving you their view with the bottom of that paragraph. Now, the normal person reckons with the possible, which does, without shifting from its position as a possible, requires a sort of actuality. I don't know what that means. I have a question. Do you understand that the normal person reckons with the possible, shifting from the possible?
This is the fact of the house.
Is it?
This is the sense of possibility provided in part by possessing a normal abstract sense.
Reckons with the, well, if it is, then it can't be for him. At least the back of the house is never possible, but actual, if you know the house. The normal person reckons, I don't know what that is. I really don't. Let's try the next sentence. In the patient's case, however, the field of actuality is limited to what is met with in the shape of a real contact or related to these data by explicit process of deduction. Well, there you get the two. Real contact is the broken down version of the gauged actual, and putting it together by a process of deduction is Snyder's broken down version of the abstract rational, and people have something in between. I don't claim to have understood that very well, although I don't think I've betrayed it either. Uh, so, so, so they think Snyder has an impoverished concrete because he lacks the abstract. That's what I think. That's what I've just been reading say. That if he didn't have all this possibility, if he couldn't also bring in an abstract account, he couldn't do what he's doing. I'm going to go fast over this because I'm going to get to the end and we used a lot of time. So they don't see what's missing in Schneider that normal people have, which is the body schema. They don't have that way of putting it. They see Schneider lacks motor intentionality, which is an openness to other situations they see this on 126. This is what they say. What he lacks is neither motility nor thought. And we have brought, oh, this is the amazing point. I got to go through this slowly. This is really hard because they get so close to getting it right at this point. And it sounds almost like Merleau-Ponty's own view, but it's not Merleau-Ponty's own view. I don't know what to make of it, but I'll read it and try to tell you what I think. What Schneider lacks, and this has got to be, I take it, speaking in the name of Gail Goldstein, all the footnotes of Gail Goldstein, the whole context, uh, is neither motility nor thought. We are brought to the recognition of something between movement as a third-person process and thought as a representation of movement, something which is an anticipation of or arrival at the objective and ensured by the body itself as a motor power, a motor project, motor intentionality. And that's to say the Gestaltists normally already recognize responding to affordance. That is, they normally don't think that it's all the projects of consciousness that direct our movement, that our movement can be responding to the solicitation of things. So, but Schneider lacks that, it looks like, though I can't believe it because I would have thought that's what he had. So let's go on. The patient either conceives the ideal formula of the movement or else he launches his body in blind attempts to perform it. Whereas for the normal person, every movement is indissolubly movement and consciousness of movement. See, that's a bad way to put it. Mixture of the physiological, mechanical on the one hand, and the mental on the other. That's what they see within motor intentionality is. I guess I'm trying to think this through. It looks like they have the phenomenon of motor intentionality, but they don't have a way to express it except by saying that it's a mixture of movement and consciousness. But and I think that's right. I think remember I said the criticism of the Gestalt people is always they've got the phenomena right, but they've got the wrong way of describing it. And that's what he's saying here. And now comes in the background. They've got a notion of background, but it's not his background. So let's look at it. This can be expressed by saying that for the normal person, every movement has a background, and that the movement and its background are moments of a unique totality. The background to the movement is not a representation associated with it, but is immanent in the movement, inspiring and sustaining it at every moment. That's good Gestalt thinking. The plunge into action is, from the subject's point of view, an original way of relating himself to the object and is on the same footing as perception. Okay. Light is thus thrown on the distinction between abstract and concrete movement. The background in concrete movement is the world as given, whereas the background to abstract thought is built up. So there's top-down background and there's bottom-up background, and it's certain that Merleau-Ponty says, remember his notion of background is supposed to be deeper than and take account of both kinds of background. I read that quote last time. So they're ready to say that when you're concretely engaged, you do it, you have motor intentionality on a background. And when you're abstractly thinking, you have mental stuff going on a mental sort of background. What they can't say is that all of this is always in a bigger background, namely the organism trying to get an optimal grip on the world. That's not even in here as a candidate, and that's what's missing for them, I think. Look, so then comes the motion to the friend, and we've done that for both forms. Okay, let me see where I am and what I can skip. I think there are two backgrounds, and that's as near as the Gestaltists can get to getting it right, I think. I want to read now on 129. By the way, there's more background talk on 128. There's the kind of stuff that takes place in the realm of being of the actualist, the middle of 128. The latter, on the other hand, the virtual, that's what the abstract deals with. The first adheres to a given background. The second throws out its own background. See, these are not the background that Heidegger and Merleau-Ponty want to talk about. So that's okay. So now on 129, about 5 lines down. The reason is that all these operations require the same ability to mark out boundaries and directions in a given world. What are we talking about? Well, lots of things that he's listed. I hope you don't go back and get them. To establish lines of force, to keep perspectives in view in the world, to organize the given world in accordance with the projects of the present moment, to build into the geographical setting a behavioral one, a system of meanings outwardly expressive of the subject's internal activity. There, we're clearly not in Merleau-Ponty Heidegger. The idea of the subject's internal activity getting expressed outward. The whole conceptual framework of inner and outer is something Merleau-Ponty and Heidegger both deny. In Heidegger, the phrase is, Dasein is the world existingly, and I just read you a similar phrase in Merleau-Ponty, that we are perceiving we are the world. So this inner-outer talk is clearly something you won't buy. For the patient, the world exists only as one ready-made and congealed, whereas the normal person, his projects polarize the world and he magically into view. I used to think this was a perfect statement of Merleau-Ponty's position. Now I think it can't be. For one thing, it's in Miguel Goldstein's section. The two, projecting, remember, is always, I think, too Sartrean, not even too Heideggerian. It's Sartre's kind of understanding of Heidegger. It's an active, and never mind what projection is in Heidegger. For Sartre, it's this kind of activity, bringing magically a host of signs which guide actions as notices in a museum guide the visit. See, that's Sartre, but that's sort of off. It isn't that the subject projects a meaning, which then gives things in the world significance. It's that things in the world just have significance and draw actions out of you. So the function of projection or summoning in the sense of meaning and summons to happen in the person is also what makes abstract movement possible. And I guess, that's why I say this is hard, and I may be wrong, and I'm reading it differently than I used to. I used to think there's Merleau-Ponty stating this view, but I want to say now that three things suggest that's wrong. Then I'm saying it, and then you can figure it out on your own. One, the footnotes are all together Goldstein. That he's explaining their view of Schneider, and he's using a vocabulary, projection, subject, consciousness, which is not the kind of his vocabulary, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I in rereading this, when we use the terms geographical setting and a behavioral one, that's Gestalt psychology. That's exactly what he thinks is wrong there.
Go say a little more about that.
So the geographical setting would be, I guess, what we could call the objective world and corresponds to objective space. So the Gestalt psychologist would think that there's the real objective space. And we're, in the sense perceptions, and the behavioral setting or the behavioral environment is kind of the virtual or phenomenal one, but not the real one.
It's the one we project onto that.
So
that's the clue.
Right. And so the reason why it's so important is because, this chapter is on the spatiality of one's own body and motility. And it's these two kinds of spaces that we need to get clear on: the objective world space, and the space where we live life looking up and down, the left and the right, the whole space. And that's the kind of space that we need to, being what's really up.
Okay, which is not a projection of the mind or subject or consciousness. I think the Gestaltist would have said it's not a projection of consciousness on to this physical, geographical space. It's the lived world, the real bottom line, which will call forth the appropriate action from us.
The pre-objective view, that's the rich space.
It's interesting though. I always get tripped up because the Gestaltists have the phenomena of the world calling forth the action from us.
But they think it's all Cartesian.
Exactly. Keep saying this. The Gestaltists have the phenomena right, but they have the conceptualization of it wrong. They've only got the categories of conscious and physical world. They've got for itself and in itself, maybe. I don't know about that. Do they? I don't know whether they use those terms. I doubt.
They don't use the term disguise. So they come up with their own terms like geographical setting.
Okay.
Cartesianism.
Okay, but it certainly seems always to be the right phenomena described in the wrong way. That's what I think this whole chapter is going to go on about. Ooh, 15 minutes. Yeah.
So, I mean, when you mentioned stars in that paragraph on 129, but if you finish off the paragraph, it talks about moral requirements. There's an aspect of it, of the projection. Is that, so is he basically saying, I mean, with the critique of projection, that there's an ethical?
No, no ethical. This is just utterly unethical. Why would you say that? But come and tell me in office hours or after class, because we're so far from anything ethical. I just don't. I'm just done.
Well, these critique of projection, and if you're saying what you're saying is right,
projection is the wrong category for understanding how meaning gets in the world. Let me put it. Remember the museum. The mind does not put meaning in the world like putting signs in a museum. Meaning is in the world. Meaning is as in the world as you can get. In the Heidegger, in the world. I mean, if you were asking where did the meaning get put into the physical universe, then you could say, well, maybe consciousness put it there. Who knows how it got there? In fact, well, never mind. But if you're talking about the world in which people live and act, they don't go around projecting onto this world meanings. Yeah.
This is what Merleau-Ponty says.
What's that?
Merleau-Ponty says that you could project meaning in the world.
Really? Tell me where.
At the It's around 160, I think, for your completion. It's not when you think the intention about let us say rather that the life of consciousness is underlined by an intentional arc that projects around us our past, our human.
Interesting. Wow. Well, let me tell people where that is. This is on page 157 for us, because I was going to get to that and read that. Oh, is it? Yes, that's interesting. Interesting. Okay, that's a tough one. I don't know what to say about that. I'll have to go back to the drawing board, but I don't like it. And let me think of it, baby. See, I think well, let's get the phenomena right first. Okay, the phenomena is that the more we learn about the world from experience, the more what we learn shows up in the world for us. So that you talk Merleau-Ponty like a city which once you had to figure out, now it looks like this is the way to the grocery store and this is the way to the bank, and the streets look like that. So that the intentional arc is the way experience feeds back into the world, so that you don't need a representation of the world in your mind.
No, but
Well, that's the question.
The question is, are we projecting meaning onto the world? And that's what we're not doing.
No, that's
But here in this passage, there is this other kind of temporal projection we can do it the intentional arc, because our sensitivity for receiving the meaning is.
Let me say it my way, but that's exactly right, Rick. I think it's very helpful, and I don't think you disagree with it. It's the difference is between a blank world that has no meaning, on which consciousness projects meaning, and the intentional arc, which is what I was trying to describe the phenomena. The world is already full of meaning, but as I get more and more experience, the world gets more and more meaning. And I'm sorry he calls that projection, but at least it isn't the kind of projection that Sartre talks about, where really, well, I think it shouldn't be called projection. Right. Okay, but it's wrong to call it projection, because projection really sounds like, when it's normally used by these people, all meaning comes from us and is put on the world. And we agree, in this passage, projection means, as I have experienced, my world acquires more and more meaning. And
so it's through this experience that it has meaning, so the meaning is there before you experience it.
That's true, and it's so subtle, but it's so different, fundamental. Consider again, it's like this blank world in which consciousness puts up these signposts to tell you where to turn in the course. Let's take the city. It's a funny difference. It's as if the city were just the sort of geographical setting. It had these buildings and streets, and then consciousness projects on that, turn right here to go to the grocery, turn left here to go to the cleaners. And that's close. That's the way Sartre thinks about it, I think. Now, but what Merleau-Ponty thinks is, well, it's true that when I come to the city, it already has a lot of meaning, but as I cope with it, it gets more and more, and this street comes to look like the way to the cleaners and the way to the so. And now, the only difference is, instead of saying consciousness projects onto the city that meaning, what he says is the lived body, in coping with the city, gets a richer and richer experience of the city. And That's called the intentional arc. Now, are we disagreeing about that? I'm just trying to get the distinction.
I don't think we disagree, but I think the important thing to have in mind is that fundamentally there is a third realm between pure consciousness and pure mechanistic approach. But still there's a discrepancy between the body and the consciousness. The body is here before the consciousness. So you're not conscious that your body is still projecting significations in the world.
The lived body.
It's when the feedback is being had by the consciousness. So the consciousness thinks that the signification, the meaning are in the world in an almost objective way. Because they're here because the body is in the world. So it's like the consciousness doesn't understand, cannot grasp the fact that the body is in the world before.
I see what you mean. I mean, what he's saying is, that's what Sartre is missing, in other words. If you don't have a sense that the lived body outside of consciousness can be responding to meanings and feeding meanings back into the world, which is what the intentional arc is, if then you have to think that you have consciousness gave meanings to this meaningless world, which is what Sartre does think, and Kant, I mean, all intellectualists think it, because any intellectual sees that the world is full of meaning, and they wonder where it came from, and it couldn't have just come from the physical world, so the mind must have put it there. That's the mistake. But it's true that something put it there, namely the body put it there, and now the only problem is that it'd be unfortunate to use the word projection for both of these, but he did. And so now and now Eric, yeah. Oh, really? Really? Oh, where's that? Really, really? Well, show me. I'm delighted. But then why does he use it? Yeah, I'm lost yet.
Which page? The same page? Which page?
157 of this. What are you on? You got the old one.
No. This one. 136.
136 in the other one? But I still don't see it, and I think it's so funny that
Okay, searchlight.
Searchlight. Where's Searchlight? Oh yeah, okay. Searchlight is inadequate. Is that projection?
In French, it's projecteur.
Interesting. What a sort of joke. But okay. The idea of phenomena is the same. I mean, it's something, the searchlight has the light in it, and it puts it onto the objects which are intrinsically dark. That's Sartre. But in Sartre language, the for itself gives all the meaning to the in itself. And Goldstein, it's the what do you call it, gives the meaning to the geographical.
Like
what do they call the other thing?
The geographical environment and the behavioral.
Okay. So, okay, but good. We've got something here anyway. So now let's read it again, because it's a very important quote. And it's sort of summing up what we've just been saying. The life of consciousness, cognitive life, the life of desire, perpetual life, all of that is what? Perceptual. Yeah, what did I say? Very funny. Okay, perceptual life is subtended by an intentional arc which projects around about us. And now you have to understand that, to me, always already has projected and goes on projecting. Put it in the Heidegger chart. Always already projects and goes on projecting around us our past, our future, our human being, our physical and ideological and moral situation, or rather, which results in our being situated in all these respects, situated in this engaged sense of situation. It is this intentional arc which brings about the unity of the senses, of intelligence, of sensibility, and motility in this which goes limp in illness, that is, in Schneider, particularly, in this case. Let me see, as I said all this, you may say it again, it's so important. I mean, you see what he's doing. He's saying the whole view that somehow, either the whole world, that we have a representation of the world. And as we learn more and more about the world, we update our mental representation, which is the cognitive view, or that we have this conscious capacity to project meanings onto the world, which is the psychoanalytical or psycho something. Who said psycho? psychological view. I don't know who to attribute it to besides Sartre, but it's certainly not just Sartre's view. I mean, it's a big view. That neither of those views is right. We neither have a mental representation of the world, nor do we project the meanings onto the world. The world is, this is how I put it in my computer book way back, the best representation of itself. You don't need a copy of it, and you don't need to give it meaning from scratch. The world is always already there and giving you a whole lot of meanings and guidance, and gets more and more the better you get at dealing with things. That's just a brilliantly right thing to say. You're not looking unhappy with that, are you? You look like you're
I
unhappy.
think the problem is that I think when you do a thing that what I described is for individualism, for example, but the problem is that the body, as Merleau-Ponty stated at the beginning of this chapter, the body is only a part of the system of the world itself. And so it's like this thing designed the world existing.
Yeah.
It's the same. It's just
Right. It's this circle. It's people don't see this in there. I feel
you have to do this perspective at first, but then you say, well, you know, at the very end of the whole part of the body, you say, well, it was only a path towards the world itself. Right. The body first, so that's not doing.
So it's always, remember, I keep saying, keep remembering that the body is responding to solicitations of things. Of course, things don't solicit if you don't have a body, but the body couldn't respond to their solicitations unless they actually had them. That's the intentional arc. That's the feedback loop. That's the basic story he's got, and he doesn't give it up. He makes it even stronger in the next book, the visible and the invisible, where you see, there's sort of interesting, important general things to say. There is a tendency in this book for it to look sort of Kantian, meaning it looks like the body is really the source of the unity of the world. It's the body schema that does it. And then it looks too much like the body's got some kind of privilege over the meaningful world, whereas what we've just been saying about the intentional arc shows that it's totally equal, the body and the world. What? Exactly.
You can't talk about the body anymore.
I know. Well, that's what I was leading up to. In the visible and the invisible, he stops talking about the body because the body has gotten too much over to looking like a constituting subject, an entity which gives the meaning to things and has some kind of prior unity which it projects on things. It does. When he's at his best, he never says that, but he does sort of go in that something like using the word project, and so forth. And so when he writes his next book, which he didn't finish, he just drops the body and talks about the flesh, and the flesh includes the body and the world. It's that whole big Gestalt, which he's always had his eye on, the big Gestalt, which is bigger than us and the world. And so you see why. And then the people read the visible and the invisible, and they get it so wrong. They say, well, Merleau-Ponty has totally changed his position. He doesn't believe in the body anymore. He believes in the flesh. Well, he hasn't changed it. He's been true to it. He's taken it to its limit. He's cleaned it up. All you got to say is he's cleaned up his act between this book. Don't let anybody tell you, though, I think it's all over the French literature as far as I can see. Merleau-Ponty made some kind of radical change, repudiated this book. You read that again and again. It's just not so. I'm glad we've got Olivier here to represent the good French reading of it. Yeah.
I was going to make a small point on the quote. You want to extend that for your use of intentional art. If we just use the word orient after that instead of project, it would make a lot more sense.
Well, let's try that. Where is that about projecting?
The light, the consciousness, light.
Oh, yeah.
Light,
okay. I see, which projects around us, which orients us in. Well, no, because he wants the word like projects in this. Don't forget, he is saying, quite sensibly, that it's because you get experience of the world. I mean, how will we put it? It's a tricky sub thing, but your world looks different than my world. The city that looks perfect, easy to get around into you, it looks like it's a puzzle to solve with a map to me. So there is some sense that each of us is putting our meaning into the world. We don't want to deny that. So at one level, and you've got this right in sort of, there is the body projecting around all of us, our physical situation. It's projecting around all of us our basic perceptual situation. it's projecting around us our shared moral situation, where his comment comes in. That is with our general sense of who's good and bad and what's right and wrong and what's disgusting and what's admirable and so forth, which we all share. Because remember, sort of, it's one perceives in me, one perceives the world, one perceives all these moral qualities too in me. But then there is also going to have to be my own past and future. Besides this general human setting, I don't know whether that's going to be in here.
I think it's on 149 at the bottom. I think he says what you want. So I think the example is with the friend. So like a friend, like my mother, has a sense of whether I'm happy or sad with the tone of my voice.
Okay.
And this is part of her sensitivity to my voice, which you might not.
In fact, what I would hear.
But
Right.
there is this primary world.
Where do you see that? Oh, yeah, the primary world. Okay, the primary world is the one I was describing.
Right.
And its secondary meaning carved out in the primary world. And so all I went on to this speech about is, but there is a sense in which I'm organizing, that is, enriching this world and responding to, maybe the better thing is to say the rich sort of thing. The world is already rich, but as I get more and more tuned into it, I can respond more and more to its richness. Let me say that again about the city. You could hear it two ways. I have to stop. You could hear that as I get more and more experienced, I project into the city more and more signposts. The baker's over here, and the restaurants over there. Or you could say, the funny thing to say, but I think it's what Merleau-Ponty and Heidegger think. There's all this rich, and Gibson thinks, there's all this richness in the world.
They're two different views.
Who?
Well, as you just said, I think Merleau-Ponty has this kind of more view that Olivia was suggesting, where we're kind of finally giving meaning. I think he does it kind of seen it as public. That's another point. But then there is another view, which is we're just getting more and more sensitive to this is the world.
Keep your eyes open. I will too.
Are we advocating richness, or do we just get better? That's my
Yeah. It does look like Merleau-Ponty, in this book anyway, thinks that we play a role in adding more and more meaning to the city. It could be, you could have a weird metaphysical view, but it may be the right one, is to say all this meaning is already in the city. The street that leads to the baker and the street that leads to the restaurant and so forth. And as you get more and more familiar with the city, you get more and more attuned to all the meaning and references that are already there among the objects. I think that that's what he would like to say, but I don't know anywhere where he says it. You look like you want to say, do you find any place where he says anything like that?
No, that's not Merleau-Ponty.
No, you don't think it's Merleau-Ponty. That's me.
No, that's me.
Okay, well, let me.
And no one else finds.
I have sort of, we were jumping around. We read the crucial quotes, I think. Yeah. I'll go back, and if we haven't, I will bring them in next time.
I don't think we just agreed at all. We have to